thanks for coming along, Alison.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So you've been an inspiration to me because when I embarked about a year ago and left the comfort of partnership, I looked around the market and you'd done it all before and you'd done it many years before. And thank you for the support. I need to say that. Thank you for the support as sort of setting out on this path. So I really appreciate how you took me under your wing and you're very kind and referred work. And so I really do appreciate that. I've said that before, but I need to say it here.
Very kind of you.
So let's talk about you. So 2013, here you are in private practice. You'd worked for over 20 years at a global firm called DLA and been in the insurance space. What prompted you at that stage of your career? You're at the height of your game. And why mediation?
It's funny, but I kind of feel like I've been mediating since I was 6 years old. I had a father who was kind of on the spectrum and an Aspergian, and I had a mother who was an art teacher and so forth, and they couldn't communicate with one another. So actually bringing about communication and resolving conflict has been something that's been part of my world. So I didn't really understand, obviously, at that stage what a mediator was. But as time went on, I'm more and more obviously doing mediations within practice. I just felt that that's what I wanted to do. There came a time where I couldn't ignore that voice any longer, and I couldn't see anyone like me in that space, so it was daunting. But it was just inevitable. I wanted to do it, and it had come to a point. My father had died a year beforehand, and I had thought to myself within a year of that, I wanted to be doing the thing that I really knew I loved. And so right to the dot on the year later, I developed a mediation practice.
What was unique at the time was you were the first female mediator in Australia?
Yeah, I think there were some doing occasional mediations in family law, and there were bits and pieces of inspiration out there. But in terms of any women actually having a mediation practice, there were none in the country that I could ascertain. But you have to start somewhere, and there were lots of good models around, and because I'd been so interested, and I read a lot in relation to mediation, conflict, decision-making, behavioural dynamics, all those sorts of things, I think that there was a world there that really opened my eyes to the possibility of that being a thing.
But it wasn't, in a way, a well-trodden path in your case, and you were it was the path less travelled. So how did you go in the initial years? Was there a level of resistance? How did you counter that?
I know you talk about leadership a lot, and I know you talk about the issues around imposter syndrome and all those sorts of things. And I think the way I countered the resistance, which was definitely there, I mean, it's a very, very hard practice to establish for anyone. You will know the amount of work that you're putting into it. The barriers to entry are extremely high. You have to have a lot of trust, experience. And I think the thing that helped me the most was realising that it's not about being better than someone to establish a practice. It's about being the best you can be at something. And if you can do that, you will feel a sense of belonging that for me overcame everything. Mm-hmm. So I just gradually thought that if I keep doing things to be the best I can be, then I will feel that I belong as a mediator in practice in Australia, and I will just have some self-belief in relation to that. The other thing is I didn't put any pressure on myself as to how long it would take.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that it would take 3 years. I worked on that basis, and it took every bit of that. Mm. And so once I did that, the time came. Yeah. And with great support. There were some terrific people who really went out on a limb to use me because I was new, and you know what that's like, and that becomes exciting, and one step after the next step you get there.
Certainly from my perspective, what I've looked on and I've really admired is, first of all, you overcome the narrative that sometimes happens that you're retired. You've said, no, this is a full-time skill set. This is an important, distinct skill set. And looking on at the market, I thought you're really interesting as well because you've got not just a mediation business that I've done traditionally as a lawyer, but a broader practice and an international practice. And very much I've seen you from afar going, you're clearly treat this as a very separate and distinct skill set for which you're working full time. Was that obviously something that was always intentional? That was always part of the game plan, if I can call it that?
I think my experience generally made me realise, and certainly my reading, and also the people who are doing this work internationally aren't lawyers. They're anthropologists, they're sociologists, they're psychologists. And I got the opportunity early on to do some work with those people, and I realised that my view of it, that it really was an entirely separate and distinct profession and skill set, was very much reinforced by that. And if you treat it as you're a lawyer, and if you're a lawyer, therefore you can mediate, you will fall and you won't develop a practice. And that perspective of dialogue and brain science and decision-making, if it was just about the law, everything would be easy. The other thing is, internationally, there's too much history for the available geography. So it's not about the legal rights. It's about looking at where people are now and seeing what can bring about not so much resolution but management of a conflict.
Yeah.
All of that feeds into it being a really separate and distinct skill set.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that, I think, comes out early in your story, in my story as well, because during the accreditation course, it was probably 60% lawyers. And in fact, the feedback I got, surprise, Damien, you're too quick to move to problem-solving zone here. You're not a lawyer. Because you read these case studies and they're quite artificial. And you sort of, the lawyer in you goes, well, I'll carve it up this way. And people go, so it's actually, it's great that from the beginning in the accredit, you get a broader array of people and a skill set, which I found really refreshing and interesting.
Yeah, it's quite liberating, actually, because you think your experience is limited in law to a mediator being this particular person, certainly in my day, retired judges, but you realise the wider you get into mediation and dialogue work, there's just a really broad array of people approaching it from very different perspectives. And it's really exciting.
Yeah. One of the things that I've had to navigate, because it is the road less travelled, and you know, I've thought, do I belong in these rooms at times? I've certainly had to, in my own personal life, look at myself internally and go, oh boy, this, you know, am I okay? Is this some flight of fancy? What am I doing here, Damien? You know, what was I thinking? Do I belong in this space? Can I do this? I guess that's the voice of the imposter syndrome that comes out to play. We've all got it. How have you navigated that?
I breathe. I care about conflict, I think. And I think my history means that I've had some building up of skills in relation to those things. And I've known how much better it feels when you can manage and resolve some conflict. It's been such a big part of my life that in managing the self-doubt, you just had to know that you could get there because you have done it, and this is a broader world, and you can apply it, and you can love it, and you can be passionate about it, and you can belong.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of that journey to belonging, I think, that cuts out the imposter.
Yeah, I've had to navigate that. And the other thing I've navigated, I think, really interestingly, is a transition in terms of just preparation. Like, you know, there was times when I was preparing in the early days and you could see the lawyer in me going, the right answer may be X or Y. But I guess feeling you belong in the space means, for me, it's meant a high level of psychological flexibility about, I'm prepared, I know what I'm doing, I can do this, and I can be responsive to what, you know, because sometimes as lawyers we like it to be quite prescribed. We know this is the way. So I've just had to navigate being really psychologically flexible and meeting the environment that I find myself in, which could be quite fluid, despite the best preparation. In other words, that's a key part of preparation almost.
It's a key part of preparation, and I think the people element of it is a key factor. And the more you learn about behavioural dynamics, about the psychology that you've mentioned, about decision-making, about the people element of the difficulty of getting things resolved, you find that the more you invest in that and the more you look to those cues and the more you understand what is the key issue behind conflict, the more you can build on what is in the room to create a new platform.
Yeah.
So I really pay a lot of attention to the people, as you will. I obviously pay a lot of attention to the, like you, I go in completely prepared, read everything, understand the dynamic and the fairness issues between the parties.
Yeah.
Because that's a much broader thing than just the legal issues if
That's
you're doing
right.
a legal mediation.
That's right.
It's much, much broader. You have to allow voice to be given to that. You have to allow hearing of that. You can't just impose your will on what you think is the legal solution. And you also, with solicitors, have to understand the client dynamic and sometimes industry, government, much wider context to things. And the more we invest in that bigger picture, the better we are at the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I've noticed that myself. I've noticed the importance of, as you say, meeting the moment, being psychologically flexible and just giving people space and really getting to the nub of what people want to be seen and heard about.
Yeah, yeah.
And every dynamic is slightly different. And actually one of the things I've enjoyed more than I expected was the ability to navigate rooms that as an advocate I wasn't in.
Yeah.
And I've actually really enjoyed that dynamic. I mean, I'm a lot earlier in my story than you, but it's something that has just brought more humanity and more colour.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and I'm pleased you voiced that because I know initially one of the things I was worried about, because I came from a defence firm, was whether plaintiff lawyers would feel that I was too oriented one way or the other. It was almost the opposite of that, in that I was listening more to the room that I hadn't been in as much.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
Interesting.
We can say that and know that's the case. And I think, in those first years, that is something that you do have to navigate in your practice, that rooms that you haven't been in as much will trust you.
Yeah.
But that's what brings all those human connection items and care and understanding and being prepared, all those other elements, and not walking in and assuming you know the room.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What advice would you give other solicitors? And I know you mentor them who are looking, because we were talking about the fact that there was another solicitor I knew who did this before we did, but it isn't the path less travel for solicitors. I notice in New South Wales there's a few more solicitors branching out. But I think it will be. I think it's likely that more solicitors will look at this, and we'll touch upon the future of mediation. So what's your take on that, Alison? What advice would you give to solicitors who are wanting to go down this path?
It's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people try, who I'm mentoring through that process, to do things in a number of different ways. Some of them want to stay in their firms and have that as an added bow. Some are wanting to leave it till later. Some are wanting it's really, some are wanting to do it as maybe have it there as a retirement option, all those sorts of things. As we've already talked about, it's a job in itself.
Yeah.
And I kind of say to people that if you're doing this as a retirement option, to me, that's not the right frame of mind. Yeah. But if you're doing it as a serious, distinct and different profession, it's very hard to do it while you're also in a law firm, because the conflicts are different, the issues are different, the timing, the invoicing, all of those things. It makes it virtually, I think, impossible to do it as a solicitor in a practice where you've got client responsibilities. There also is that issue of trust in relation to people not feeling that information is going to be used in some way to build a practice and all those sorts of things. So I think you do have to be independent. And no doubt there'll be people that can manage those things, and all goodwill in the world to them. But I think the better practice is to be independent, and then to be engaged in the process of learning to be a mediator. Different skills, learn, read, invite reflection. Do not think you are there to just solve a problem. You're there to deal with people. You're there to mediate issues. Often the issues that are down on paper as to the dispute are not the dispute. It's so many times people will say to me, but this happened later on, not related to it, or I had this experience, or I know this person, what they did. And it's just, it's a totally different environment to discover the way in which conflict can be brought down to the essence of how you can bring about a resolution or manage the conflict. So they have to be good at dealing with people and seeing it as a bigger enterprise, I suppose.
I think the point you made too, from my perspective, is I think you're right. I think some family lawyers and others do it well in law firms, but it is difficult. I think you probably, as a solicitor, got to be seen to be out of the arena in the traditional sense.
I think that's right. I think that is easier to navigate your way through the trust
Element involved.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the future of mediation. I mean, I've often thought when I was looking at reinventing myself, well, at least I won't be disrupted too much by the bots. This is about human interaction. Sure, they can write now. They write really well, actually. They simulate information. They summarise. But surely this is about people-orientated skills. So we're not going to be as AI interrupted. It's much more about meeting the moment with people. But of course, there is the potential for AI in terms of broader conflict. How do you see that space? Are you optimistic like me about the human connection element in mediation?
Yeah, I am. I'm optimistic also about the AI connection to some extent. So it depends. Like mediators are horses for courses, so is AI. AI can be used in a range of conflict issues. I know, for example, Airbnb, I had an issue with Airbnb a little while back, and that matter was mediated with AI bot, and it did a good job. If all the elements are pretty much formulated and it's about very limited factual things, AI can do a great job. I actually
think
it's very
prescribed, isn't it?
It is prescribed. And I think even in circumstances where, for example, there are lots of types of things within magistrates' courts that are very prescribed in relation to driving whilst without a licence, or things like that are very prescribed in relation to how those things are done. AI will deal with those quite beautifully. And there will probably be an opportunity where you can accept the AI to go to a human, or you can be very content with the result. There are certainly, because I've looked at this most recently, models where AI is involved in potentially solving bigger disputes or more complex disputes. But the models I've seen at the moment do a lot of the preparatory work through the use of AI, but still have a human at the mediation point. Because as we've discussed, it's not about facts. It's a very human dynamic. It's a very decision-focused, behavioural, wonderful, incredible thing. And AI can only go so far with that.
And some of the work I've done, and most of it, one person is say traditionally an insurance claim is an unsophisticated client, and for them, I think that we talked about that. You sometimes find yourself overcompensating as former defendant lawyers, but there's that human element really matters. You sense it in a more acute way. That connection, even really you see the connection with their own legal team, how much that matters.
It really does, and in fact, it's really interesting internationally that kind of what I call kind of a first stage of mediation, which is about the understanding, the empathy and those sorts of things. That can take a long time, and that's not something that can be done by AI. That hearing, that knowledge that someone is understood, that knowledge that this is a place where I can safely talk about things. All of those things can be guided in a way by mediators that is truly profound. And that's the wonder of why humans will still be very much involved in the process.
Yeah, I tend to agree. On going back a bit, one of the things that just jumped out at me is obviously, it's a separate skill set, and in my case, I'm at the beginning of the road, really. How do you assimilate feedback and reflection in a practice? Because at times it can be quite lonely. I know I've maybe rolled over at night and thought, maybe I should have done that differently, and or maybe I could have. We all have those moments. So how do you assimilate feedback and not be too hard on yourself about?
It's a really, really good question, because we don't have others there and it can be isolating. I think there's a range of things you can do. Every so often I'll go and do something with other mediators, a course, a journey, whatever. I get together with other mediators on a regular basis. A lot of the women that I've introduced to mediation, we get together, we talk about what things have worked, what other things haven't worked, what issues that they've had in mediation. And so I've got a really good network of wonderful mediators, including yourself. So that dialogue is important. In terms of immediate feedback, you can talk to your lawyers who have been in a mediation with you. How did that work? How is your client? Do you think there are things that other approaches might have brought about? Are you content? All those sorts of things. You can have those discussions. And I think, I'm a hard critic of myself. It's quite interesting. I had a dialogue that I didn't think went as well recently, and I have this proliferation of notes of every book I've ever read on mediation or decision-making or human dynamics or whatever. I take notes. And I went back home and I tried to understand why that didn't go as well as I wanted to do. It went well in the room, but then when we tried to organise some things after everyone was together, it didn't go well. And I went through and I went, oh, yeah, I get it now. I spent not enough time in the empathy stage, in the dialogue stage, and too much in the solving stage. Yeah. And, I had notes on that I read through and I went, that's the answer. That's where I think I went wrong. Yeah. So, I do a range of things.
Yeah, I've had the same moments in myself. I was reminded of that. Obviously the problem-solving stage is supposed to be grounded in the empathy, and if you skip the empathy, you're really cheating yourself out of the problem.
But it's even more than that. You're never going to skip it.
No.
Well, hopefully, if you're a good mediator, you're never going to skip that. It. What you're going to do is not spend enough time. Yeah. And when you think of things like even on a grander scale, if you think of what Nelson Mandela did in the Truth and Reconciliation processes, he spent from 1995 to 2003 in the empathy stage, largely. Like, that was just...
Understanding the perspective.
Having people talk from both sides of the record. So in a smaller scale, the right amount of time spent in that is critical.
Yeah. And I think certainly I'm conscious of that as a lawyer, conscious of the tendency at times to move too quickly into pragmatic problem solving. I mean, every mediation's different, but it's something that I've really had to catch myself.
Yeah, you have to let it go a bit, don't you? You kind of have to. Because the solution comes out of not what you think the solution is.
That's right.
A classic mediation this week where the solution came out of something that was really explored differently in a different room from a lot of the other things that the other parties were talking about. And it was wondrous. You got to spend that time.
It's remarkable. Yeah. So where to from here for you, Alison? Just keep mediating, keep doing your international work.
Yeah. I'm very, very fortunate. I've got the most amazing group of people that I work with at Mediators Beyond Borders, and I encourage everyone, if they can come along to the Mediators Beyond Borders Summit in Peru this year, because it's extraordinary, the sort of international, when you get a bunch of international mediators together, the dynamic is extraordinary. But I think more and more that's the area that I'm moving into. Just in the next week and a half, I'll be in Geneva working in relation to something there, and I'll do more and more of that. But all of those skills bring things to things here as well. But there's a lot of very quick speech at the moment. We're being funneled by international leaders and social media and so many things into a world that lacks dialogue.
Yeah, grievance and outrage. And
as Kahneman, Tversky, when they wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, talked about very quick thinking and leaving aside the opportunity to talk and analyse and understand. And I think the more there are of us that are pushing back on that and creating opportunities for conflict to dwell in the heart of our understanding is such an important realm that mediators need to be in. And so that's where I see myself more and more.
It's funny, you know, I was saying to another person before that even in my coaching work, a lot of it is actually about conflict. So it all comes back to conflict in people. It's just a different lens.
You know, it's fascinating because I do a lot of work in organisations where dialogue is broken down between senior people. It can be between the board and CEOs, or it can be all sorts of things. And often it's even not really conflict. Often it's that people communicate very differently. And so getting people to understand how that is triggering one another is a really big issue. And the light bulbs that happen when you take people through that is just phenomenal. We are so privileged to work in this area, Damien, so privileged. It's just a world of really meaningful and caring and incredible responsibility.
And it's potentially transformative.
It should be transformative.
And it should be. You should approach it with that lens.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you. I really have appreciated your time. I've certainly appreciated the support you've given me and the road you have walked before me, and it's been an inspiration, in fact, to me. So thanks for coming on The Resolution Room, and I will see you around the Brisbane streets and at various events as we do.
We will, and thank you for the opportunity. I wish you all the best in your journey, and it's an exciting place to be, and good luck.
Thanks, Alison. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.